speaker. In this debate, I'll have the honor to open this on this motion that we should support falsification of the history in order to strengthen, to create and strengthen national identities. First, I would like to speak about importance of history in the building of the national identity. What brings us together as a country is really predetermined in the history, the borders, the ethnicities, the cultural background, and all those aspects are determined by the history. So therefore, in order to build a stronger and better community, the history plays a huge role in this. And that brings me to our first point that for the young countries, the post-colonial countries and so on, they have to create and build the national identities in order for them to diminish the sense of inferiority that is imposed on them by long-held inferior position of these colonial countries or these small cultures and small nations that were assimilated by this by these bigger powers. That will not just increase their sense of importance in the world, their sense of national relevance, but it will also diminish the future chances for this kind of new colonial stuff, assimilation and so on, and will focus on multiculturalism and importance on each nation, even the smallest one. No, thank you, and their importance. And that's why we believe that the countries such as Georgia or Lithuania, that their history was that was put aside by the strongest powers such as Russia or Indian history that were put aside by big powers such as Great Britain. We believe that they have now opportunity and they should use it to strengthen the national importance for their citizens and to strengthen the national spirit and to build them as a functional societies. Which brings me to our second point, which is this will enhance the chance of progress and chance for changing this society by itself. The change that we can make in the world is predetermined by the chances that we can make through the political system. And the political systems are functioning on the nation basis. There's not a global political system. There's government of Macedonian government on each country individually, that if I want to make some effort to change my daily life, I have to go and push to my local lawmaker and so on. So in order to do that, I have to have a strong sense of nationality, a strong sense of what brings us together in that political system, and why that political system, why that unity, why that community should prospect, and why my way out of it is through that community. And it will enhance the problems such as brain gaming, brain drain in lots of these small and new countries that are problems right now in this kind of developing countries. Further on, this kind of falsification, and just to be clear, we're talking about the aspects that are not really determined by the strong sense of history, because as we know, there's a lot of spaces in the history which is not clear, whether this kind of story was clearly in that way or clearly in the other way. There's lots of places where the history as a science is not clearly positioned in which direction. We believe that in this kind of situation, the country should adopt the story that fits in their national identity, that helps their national identity, and focus on that story. And this is used by many countries that are successful democracies, that are prosperous countries, such as the United States, such as France, such as Great Britain, such as Germany. Okay.
Actually, if you would be a liberator of a country, if you would be a liberator of a country, would you like someone to change that and to put the importance of that to somebody else?
Well, who bears the benefit? That we believe that that's the crucial impact. If the benefits bears the citizens who receive the story, then we can accept the difference of opinion as we have in all other issues. There's people having a different opinion about science, on evolution, on each kind of different aspect. So there is no reason why we cannot afford having difference of opinions in history, because that by itself, difference of opinion doesn't create attention. And focusing on the positive, and that brings me to the third point, which is focusing on the positive aspects and the positive examples builds a better society and a better and more prosperous nation, because we are creating this as a role models for the nation, and it's a lot better that we are presenting a heroes, someone that made good stuff, that we're helping the powerless, and that we're helping other people, even if we exaggerate that, or even if we have to falsificate some kind of detail or some kind of uncertainty in the science of history, in order to give a positive example that this should be the role model for the nation, instead of focusing on the negative aspect of the country. Because as you said, this plays a huge importance on the psychology of individual that is determined for his future behavior and so on. For all this reason, propose this motion.
Okay, so we heard some analysis from the previous speaker about how portraying the good things that some cultural heroes or people like that did to the country may create a good national identity, good feeling of the citizens, but we never heard an explanation why we specifically have to lie about history, why we shouldn't just take a person who really existed, who really did something good, and just talk about him, why we specifically have to change historical facts. We didn't hear any analysis about specifically why we have to lie and not use the real history. So I will have 2 points in my speech. First, I'm going to talk how this actually is going to hurt national identity of people. Second thing, I'm going to talk about how this thing is going to lead not to more national identity in the positive in the positive way we understand national identity, but will lead much more to things like nationalism, racism, and stuff like that. But before that, 2 points of rebuttal. So first of all, we heard that in order to promote, in order to encourage civilians to take action in influencing the policy and going to vote and stuff like that, and to care about things happening in the country, we need to straighten national identity. And for that we say, first of all, even if there is a real connection between those two things, again, we're not fully understand why we have to lie to those people in order to get it, and not just to use good things from our history. But second of all, we say this is simply wrong. Why? Because first of all, what's really creating, making people more more caring about things happening in their country and creates the feeling that they can really change is totally different things. Like, first of all, the belief that you as a citizen can change the system, lack of corruption, governmental mechanisms that actually work, free media, knowledge of people, what's happening in their country with economy and stuff like that, when they actually read papers and can actually feel that the government is not that corrupt and they can do some changes. This is when they believe that they can actually change reality. But moreover, today we see that that it is the more nationalist countries today that citizens who oppose the government feel that they can never do any change because of the so strong unified national identity that creates a situation in which, regardless of bad thing that the government might do, everyone just supports it because of the belief that the government and the country is such a good thing and such an important thing. So today, in the democratic countries, the previous speaker talked about, like France or the US, they're much less nationalistic than many other countries, and we see how these things work there. This is the first pointer as well. Second thing, we heard all this idea about role model. First of all, we had this a premise that the falsification is necessarily something good, like we're necessarily glorifying a specific person from our history. But there are many other cases, like saying bad thing about some other nationality, like saying that bad thing that we did in the past never happened, and stuff like that. But more, so it's not only glorification of specific person, there are different many aspects. But moreover, again, we don't understand why you have to lie about specific person, and just not to take a real person that really happened. Now on to the point. So first of all, how are we going to hurt national identity? So we need to understand that first of all, there is a high chance that in the short term it is not going to work. Why? First of all, things never happen in a vacuum, right? There is always an opposition. Even if it's a weak political opposition, still there are people that are not fooled. There are people that know the real history, that actually know that the government is being lying to them, and they're trying to speak out through media. And today it is much easier when we have social media and stuff like that. And we instead of creating a more strength national identity that unifies people, we're creating a conflict in the country between different people that discuss this issue, that the government is trying to lie to the people by telling them these lies. So instead of national identity, we're creating conflict. On the long term, like even in the short term, even if we have like this strong government mechanism and the government controls the media and it can do this in the short term, so in the long term we need to understand that in most cases in history we saw how at some point lies became known to people. We see what happened to people when the Soviet Union broke apart. People actually committed a suicide, not because the Soviet Union break apart, but because they understood that they lived in a lie. They understood that everything they believed in, everything that they were being told, they felt like they lived in a lie, and we don't see how it actually created a national identity. We see how it created exactly the opposite. Those lies, in the moment they reveal, and as we see in history, they usually reveal at some point in history. This creates much bigger problems. Now let's talk about nationalism, because the border between nationalism and trying to strengthen national identities is very thin. We need to understand how we make these national identities more strong. Two cases. First of all, when we're trying to take how strong we are, how we did some big things that never really happened, what a great nation we are. Look, this is all our achievement, this is all the good things our nation did, even if it's true. Second of all, second case is by saying, look, we're a victim, someone did that to us, I don't know, like some bad thing to us, which never happened, and in both cases, those narratives create a specific way of ideology that says we're better. In one case, that we're much better than other, we're superior to other people. In other case, we cannot trust any other nations because of the things that they did to us, and we have to stand for ourselves. And eventually, create a future legitimization to creating more of these lies. So, for all those reasons, we beg you to vote.
Hello. As the Deputy Prime Minister, we'll be talking about. Firstly, I'll do some rebuttal and talk about what we just heard from the opposition, and then I'll focus on our case a little bit more and try to explain some things further. Firstly, as to rebuttal what we have just heard, we have heard why lie about our history and why not use real history, which actually happened. And later on, at the end of the speech, we heard talk about nationalism and how there are two types of things that instigate nationalism, like being under a foreign rule, which is an oppressive rule, or being making citizens believe they're the strongest nation around and the strongest nation in their neighborhood. So what we see here is that we think that this would be a problem if we were using real. Just a second, I lost my train of thought. Okay, I'll come back to this. I'm sorry. It's to go from the beginning. Yes, we agree that lack of corruption, free media, and a good economy would make a stable nation, and we believe this is true. But we are talking about emerging nations who were under colonial rule for a long time and who are not stable nations yet. We are talking about, for instance, colonial rule or under an oppressive regime. We are talking about nations that don't have specific national identities because they have because they were oppressed probably a big part of their history, like for instance, Armenia or the Kurds or certain nations who actually were historically never a nation and were never strong enough, in recent history, and don't have any specific ideals right now. And so we see here, we are not saying that we would promote faking battles certain that didn't happen, or maybe faking some huge movements that did not happen, but we are talking about specific examples of people who were heroes and specific examples of situations where that nation triumphed. And we think that emphasizing the positive, maybe even over glorifying it, only leads to greater things. Yes?
What you are talking about is not falsification of history. It's simply talking about specific facts that serve us. What you need to prove as a government that you need to false to our citizens in order to get the goals you're talking about.
I disagree. I believe that any sort of disagreeing with the current idea of history would be falsifying, because if within the regime that was on power, they can have the regime can have its own ideas of history, and it has its own established history. So basically, the history that is accepted by most people in the world can be different from what the people believe in, and we think that we should emphasize what that nation believes in. That was real history. Like for instance, in an example of taking an oppressive nation and an oppressed nation. If we think of the oppressed nation as being oppressed for a certain number of years, the oppressive nation is the nation who actually dictates how history is viewed, because history is made by winners and written by winners. So if there is a nation that is dominating another nation, they can dictate what is being perceived as history within that nation, what is being taught. We are saying that we need to have a different opinion, different voices, and choose to believe otherwise if there are any ambiguous situations. Also, we think that we can make up certain heroes and certain acts, which is a falsification of history, in order to proliferate our national ideas. We are not talking about nationalism, and we think that a strong national identity does not equal to, totalitarianism or nationalism per se. We believe that there can be a strong national identity, like for instance in the US, and still have liberal democracy happening. Some of the countries with liberal democracy, like France or the US, have very strong national identities, and these governments are under strict scrutiny. So here we don't see actually the link between, and we have heard like national countries have stronger governments. We don't actually see the link, and we think that there are many examples where this is not true. We think that countries that have a strong national identity and who not believe in a certain government, but actually believe in their own national identity, so they don't feel like there are liberal people from France, but they believe that they are French, so they will be more inclined to criticize their government if they do not agree with their government than those who do not believe strongly in their nations and are willing to abide with what the government is saying. What we are saying here is that we cannot prove, as we have heard for the opposition, you cannot falsify big historical events. And the big historical events would always come to, always surface that you have lied about these. And we are not willing to take the burden of proving this, that we can falsify historical victories or falsify big historic battles. But what we believe would be possible to falsify and would benefit nations greatly would be specific ideas, like specific events would happen. For instance, like defending a certain town for a certain amount of days. Specific nationalist heroes who become, like for instance Benjamin Franklin, who become symbols for instance equality, or for individual growth, or for like making it. So we believe that of course falsifying large historical events, large historical ideas is impossible, but we believe that falsifying certain ideas is quite possible and it benefits the nations. We think that doing this is basically focusing on the positive and emphasizing the positive, and maybe even probably, of course, the main idea is overemphasizing the positive and making things up as we go along builds a better nation. We are bringing stronger national ideas, and we see no harm here. Like what is the comparative harm to this? We have many benefits. We are building a stronger nation. We are building greater ideas within the nation. We are building better people as individuals because they profit from trusting in their nation and being more, as we have shown, more prone to criticize their governments and to expect more from their governments. And on the opposition, we don't see the link. We don't see the link between nationalism and this. We think that it's actually quite opposite. Of course, a strong national identity can lead to nationalism, but we don't think that it's necessary. We think that it depends on what the government's like and what the actual situation political is like. But on the other hand, we see no harms. What is the comparative harm of making up nationalist heroes, or making up national heroes, or making up certain events that were small scale, did not impact world history? Even if people found out about this, which would be highly unlikely that it is a lie, there would be no comparative harms, although there would be great benefits, for instance, for children or for just people living in the country who would benefit and get a better idea of their national identity if they were, like for instance, living for a long time under an oppressive regime. So here we think that this should be allowed and should be okay to do, because we see no significant harms and we do see some benefits. So this is what we think you should propose. Thank you.
All right, can we have the deputy leader of opposition, please?
So, I want to explain why we have many sorts of lies, and maybe in some cases we can falsificate some things But there is some things that if we will lie about them and falsificate them, A, it will be immoral to do that, and B, we will have so much better outcomes that regardless to the short-term benefits, we shouldn't do it. Before, I'll say that couple points of rebuttal. So, we've heard that any sort of disagree with the history is a falsification, so actually you can take, we're not really lying to the people, to the citizens, we're taking existing lie, right, and like adding it another lie. So we say that's even worse, right, because the government has its own liability to their own citizen to tell them and give them the opportunity to shape their own identity. Because what OG doesn't understand that for many people around the world, identity is more important than life itself, right? We saw Buddhists starve themselves in the name of their own identity, right? We saw Jewish people during the Spanish Inquisition that rather die than to convert to Christianity because the identity that they had and they didn't want to live in a lie, right, was more important for life itself. And when Danny told you that this kind of will be revealed in the future, right, they will actually know it. It's more likely that they will know it. They didn't engage with the idea of what happened to them when you take from them the most important thing for them that they have, because they agreed that we're speaking about new country, that they have poverty, right? They don't have social infrastructures. So for many people around there, what they have is its own identity. Allowing them in the short, in the long term, that will be even worse. So to my point, so we say, please note that the government, regardless of the social contract that it really has with its own citizens, right, to give her to inform them about some things, they have another. And although the citizens gave them their vote to empower them to actually make their life better, right? But they didn't in any action give them the right to make them to make a fraud over them, because we say, please note that just to lie to the citizen to protect them, right? Like saying, oh, we're going to war. I won't reveal to you some crucial information about the war because of intelligent security and so on. But please note that why a fraud is a really severe offense in the criminal law, because you're not just lying to someone, you're lying to someone in the way that you want to take from to actually achieve something even greater, right? We say that when you actually lie to your own citizens, right, even if the lie was or exists in the past, even if you're creating a new lie, right? Actually, what happened in the current, that when you're lying to them and when they will reveal it, so we say that people will feel that someone not just lied to them, fraud them, right? They feel that the government just didn't lie to me and tell me things that are not true. I gave them my consent to be elected again in the name of they shape my own identity. And that's the case when people feel that embarrassed, right? People feel shame about their own governments. They didn't engage the idea that Danny brought you, when that people actually, after the Soviet Union collapsed, people commit suicide because they felt that all those years, government after government, took the existing lie from the past government and created a new lie over the existing lie. And many people felt so offended by that they actually died in the worst case, or in the less severe case, they lost their trust in their own government. And therefore we say that it's not, no thank you, that's not legitimate to do that. But please note, if we're speaking even if about Macedonia, for example, that it's always, it's, in some cases, it's actually ruin your own relationship with other countries, right? We say, even in Macedonia, they claim that they are the historical Macedonia, they're symbols of Alexander from Macedonia, right? We saw that Greece don't like those kind of idea, even though Greece for many years didn't actually call them Macedonia. They called them the former republic, the former Yugoslavic Republic of Macedonia, because they felt so offended that someone took their own symbol and claimed it for another country. And even if the scientists will say that it was bad. But please note that even if you're not buying this kind of thing, we say that lying to your own citizens is a bad thing. Please note that we didn't actually get any idea, because all we got from OG was, we will have more stability, because the history written by winners, and we didn't actually have analysis about how it's going to happen, about what happened if the citizens will actually find out about those lies, what is more likely to happen, right? What will happen when some people in the country know that we're actually taking a lie and giving it another false narrative, and they didn't engage with all that narrative. Second question for second? First?
In your example for Soviet Union, they were lied about their present system and present system dysfunction, not about the ancient Europe.
Okay, so please engage with my logic, not with my example. Even if you're right, but I don't think that you're right, we say that still, in many cases, when you're lying to your own citizens, in the name of you're lying for their own identity, when their identities, even when for many people around the world, identities is above everything else, especially in the small countries, right? In the new country, when you're taking it from them, you will actually creating a worse situation. So what we gave you in our side of the house. So we told you why it's actually A, not that effective because it's more likely to be revealed. B, what happened if it will be revealed, why we will not gain all the benefits that OG wants to have. And C, why if we have some benefits in the long term, after it will be revealed, after 50 years, 60 years, right, we will have more better outcomes, and for that, we beg you to oppose. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the front benches. Can we get the member of government, please?
Ladies and gentlemen, today, aside government in this debate, we believe that the sense of national identity is so important for the individual and for the country as a whole that we believe that even a falsification of historical facts is a justifiable and necessary means for us to achieve this goal for the benefits that we will acquire by doing so, right? In today's closing government, we are going to offer analysis on what we believe are the primary roles of one state and why they are more effectively done when we have such a system in place. Furthermore, we would like to explain on a principle level why we believe that sometimes it is justified for us to lie and that sometimes noble ends and certain things can only be achieved if we use certain means that are not that in certain circumstances could not be justified by themselves, and further on provide an analysis on why we believe that this is particularly beneficial for young countries and the problems that they're facing in their societies, right? So a couple of points of rebuttal, right? They say, well, why do you have to lie about history, right? Why can you just why can we just talk about historical figures which we already possess? And ladies and gentlemen, that is not true for all countries, right? I cannot look back on my countries and find some prominent women or prominent examples that I can relate to, right? Some countries just didn't have these heroes, and they need to believe that they came from a place of significance, and they need to believe that they belong to something that is of significance in order to be incentivized to contribute to this society in the first place, right? And secondly, we believe that to a large extent we have a lot of falsification of historical facts because we believe that the very very exaggeration of something in itself presents falsification, right? The glorification of something, the portrayment of something like the big heroes that bravely thought, right? We exaggerate the number of people that died. We exaggerate how bravely we marched into a certain battle under our oppressors, and why. And further on, I will explain why we need this exaggeration and what is in store in us as citizens who later on become citizens who are willing to contribute to their country, right? And later on, they had this point about how this impairs our sense of critical thinking towards society, right? And we believe that this is not true, right? We believe that you're not incentivized to think critically in the first place if you do not believe that you have a sense to solve anything, right? You would feel this apathy or no sense of belonging, and you wouldn't feel as though you have to change anything or question everything of your society because you wouldn't believe that you need to change anything at all, right? And second of all, they say, well, what if conflict arises, right? We believe that states, when they falsificate, act as a reasonable actor, right? They believe that it is logically to presume that they would not falsificate history in order to put the sovereignty of the country in question, in order to create conflict, or in order to inflict harm upon its citizens, right? We believe as a reasonable actor, the state will falsificate history when it believes that it benefits when it's beneficial, when it has certain benefits, right? And then we have, well, what if people find out, right? We believe that social media and Twitter are simply incomparable to the PR power of the state and the power that the state has in order to persuade you in these things, right? And even if some people do find out, we believe that it is a number that cannot be compared to the people who will live this narrative and who will support this narrative and carry out their daily lives by their narrative. Another comparative of nationalism versus the sense of national identity, right? We believe that there's a great distinction between the two, right? We believe that they're simply not the same, because the sense of national identity means that you're coming from a place that did something that you believe is significant, right? And a sense of nationalism means that you just have hate towards people that do not come from your similar background, right? But a sense of national identity actually helps you recognizes that you came from a certain place of struggle, or I don't know what, and you believe that is important. That is important in itself, right? We even believe that it controls nationalism because it does not allow conflict to occur, because the state as a reasonable actor does not have need or incentive to create conflict in the first place, right? And then secondly, we have the second speaker coming up and saying that we are fragile and lack social infrastructure and so on and so forth. But ladies and we need to have our identity, right? Because there are countries out there that simply don't have their identity, right? We need to create that identity. We need to create that history that we did not have in order to feel that we must contribute to this society that, as they have said, is fragile, is lacking social infrastructure, and is lacking people who are willing to contribute to that social infrastructure, right? And further on the lying state, we believe that lying is justified, right? We believe that even if we did find out that they lied, we will, because we feel this sense of belonging that we have already built, because we have already built this cohesion within our society, we will be able to forgive them because we would know that it would be coming from a noble end. So what is this noble end, ladies and gentlemen? We believe that the state has an obligation to protect the safety and security of the citizens, right? So how is this particularly achieved, right? So firstly, as I have said, they have an incentive to avoid a sense of conflict, and they have an incentive to not falsificate history that might lead to violent outbursts or might lead to conflict with foreign countries, because that would not be beneficial for the state, right? Secondly, we believe that at times, we do not say that this will lead to war, but if there is, if an existence of a war occurred, right, you need people who are willing to fight for the country from which they come from, right? And these people are easily mobilized if they feel that they're dying for something which has genuine worth. And in order to feel that that has genuine worth, they must believe that they're coming from a place which is significant and which has value in itself, right? And we believe that these people will stand for the sovereignty of one country, and will be willing to protect that sovereignty as an autonomous being making autonomous decisions. And further on, as it was point out by the brain drain, right? We believe that in these countries, this is a particular problem, right? And when you don't feel that sense of belonging, you don't really feel that you should contribute to this society in the first place. Why should I contribute to this society when my talents can be portrayed in some country that is so much more developed? Why should I stay here, right? And when you feel that you are coming from a place of significance, and when you feel that you're coming from a place of importance, you're more likely to choose that there's perhaps this possibility that I might stay here and that I might contribute to my talents to my country, because I believe that historically it did something which is right, and therefore I feel the need to contribute to that history as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Can we get the first speaker, or the member of opposition, please?
Hello? May I start? Okay. First of all, we are closing opposition, and we strongly do not support the falsification of history in order to create and strengthen national identities. As we know from the opening government, they just talked about that, and they do not specifically determine all these things and all the reasons that would affect on creating or creating bridges between countries, and specifically telling reasons why this would affect vice versa countries, and all benefits to all two national identities. First of all, they talked about a chance of progress and chance of opportunity to change, and they just said about the government, about all these things, but they just talked about like people are slaves to government. We think like a closing opposition, that it's like a moral obligation from the government to tell to all the citizens what they really did, to create history in order to it's like immoral thing in order to falsificate history, which is valuable thing, which should not be changed, even if it's just a little maybe just a little difference, or maybe just a little change about that history, but it affects also to both of the countries. Or maybe just about maybe all the falsification. They didn't mention that all this falsification maybe it's strongly diametrically contradictional. Maybe from the regime pressure. Maybe if we falsificate that fact, maybe it would be to the democratic state, which is completely different from one to another. Another thing that they didn't emphasize is the reason why this would affect to all both countries. So then they also didn't talk about how would this also affect to creating fractions between both countries. First of all, if that would be the falsification form, if that would be falsification history, that falsification should be from both countries getting together and starting and talking about, talking which things should be changed, which things should be benefit from a country, which things should be benefit from another country. So both of countries have also common benefits. But they didn't mention that this falsification should be from both countries. There's no country that should also do the falsification all alone without another country, that both of them are part of the history. Another thing that it's also, I think that they didn't talk about the deserve as a huge or smart action that was part of history. There is immoral thing if somebody did something, and if we falsificate history, we are immediately getting all the deserves to another person, and this is immoral to the citizens. Government has a moral obligation to do that in order to find deserves to a specific person that did something important to the country, and not letting other people get the deserve. This is immoral thing to be done. For example, we have in Albania the Skanderbeg, And the Skanderbeg was also known in the whole world like also the liberator, and like a person that, if we just mention Albania, we immediately relate Albania with Skanderbeg. But what if we falsificate this fact? We would also change, and we would also have bad effects, and we would create enemies between Ottomans that Skanderbeg fight it against, and also would have things about Skanderbeg. Maybe if somebody changed the history of Skanderbeg, I would be against that. But also the Ottomans or something, or other country would be against that. On the other hand, they didn't talk about specific cases. They talked just about in general case about totalitarianism or other like faking battles, like faking other things that were part of history. We think like a closing government that we do not support the falsification, because this would affect to both of the countries and would create enemies, would create fractions. And the main point of a modern civilization is to create bridges between countries that would immediately change and would immediately create enemies between both of countries. So I think that when we are to history, it's like complex thing to be discussed. First of all, we are creating history. I think they didn't mention, and also we think that there are so many other ways on creating. In order to creating and strengthen national identities instead of falsificate the history. First of all, the country, if it has no strength relation with another country, there are so many other ways in order to create these bridges, in order to strengthen the national identities, and in order to have progress to have progress to both of the countries. On the other hand, we have all the deserts that somebody do. Everything that is unrealistic, it's something that would affect to the others. If we falsificate the history, this would affect completely also just affect to both of countries, and also something unrealistic, something that is not true. And everything which is not true is also related with not a realistic way that we are living. We are living, and that both countries would also have fractions with each other. So. We think that this is the best part. This is the only thing that we strongly do not support this falsification, because we think that there are so many other ways in order to create and strengthen national identities, not in the worst way. I think that there are the worst way of trying to create and strengthen national identities is a falsification history. Like history is a valuable thing which should not be changed. Because it's a valuable thing, and it also deserves to somebody who did something very important to the country. So it's immoral from the government, because the people, citizens, are not slaves to the government. Government should have moral things, should have moral obligation to let it deserve for somebody who did something, it deserves for somebody who did not.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what I believe closing opposition failed to recognize within the closing government case is our deeper analysis on what actually, and the perception of what actually this falsification is going to be all about that my previous speaker was talking about. So as we were speaking, is that the state doesn't have an incentive of creating false history that goes against or clashes or makes a major clash with another country, because the state sovereignty and the state security might be endangered in this place if in the case where it clashes to a major extent with another country. As opposed to this, we said that the incentive of the state of building up the national identity, which is the part of this debate, and what the opposition team needed to prove today, is that the state actually in most of the cases exaggerates the fact facts that already exist, and this is what the state has the incentive to do. Why? Firstly, because we are doing this politics in a democratic scenario, and in this democratic scenario, as it was already spoken throughout the debate, information can be leaked and information can be shared. So the only information that can be manipulated to a larger extent is the manipulation of facts about the number of people that have maybe died, or the number of people that have maybe been severely damaged by a particular war, and thus building the national identity. And we believe and we support this, we truly support this, no thank you, we will truly support this, and we will show you why through our analysis we believe that it will bring we will discuss three main clash points. First, the fundamental role of the states, of the transitional societies in building the national identity, and thus the rationale for this politics. Secondly, the concept of white lies, which we have already shown you, and its long-term implications and practical benefits that it can bring to the people in those post-transitional societies. And thirdly, we will tackle the point of why nationalism will not be brought, but rather might be even prevented with this policy. So ladies and gentlemen, first let's speak about the role of the state. The state in a post-transitional society has a much more specific role. The previous government team has already told us that when the opposition team was rebattling, they told that the problem is the corruption. The problem is not the lack of identity. The problem is the corruption. The problem is the lack of institutional capacities. And the opening government responded to this by saying that this is another problem, but that the national identity is a much more important problem. What we would like to add as an analysis is that the national identity is actually trigger for those factors, and the lack of national identity gives you lack of accountability for your state. And therefore, the role of the new states, the role of the young states, which don't have as much history and don't have as much important facts as the other ones, is to interfere within this case and to present themselves as a channeler of history that can be exaggerated for the purpose of building the national identity of the people. Let's take the example of Macedonia. For example, we've been under the Ottoman Empire, and we don't want to build a perception that we've been oppressed by them all the time. So there are epic stories, there are exaggerations which are shared, which are maybe even learned in the history books, in the books of the national language. But this, in the long run, the small uprisings that are being a little bit exaggerated or even more exaggerated have a positive implication, because in this way you tackle corruption. Why? Because you have better accountability to the state. I, as a person, think that I'm accountable for what I do to this state because someone before me has been dying to a large extent, and a large extent of my nation has been dying. The second reason for this is that you have societies and you have states in those states, and these are two different concepts. And even though the people can tend to feel connected to their societies, we are all looking to find our genes. We are all looking to research into what has been made previously, and what me as an ethnicity and every other ethnicity in a multicultural society, for that matter, wants to know about is what their ethnic group has been doing in this place in the previous time. So we're not necessarily diminishing the role of the society, but we're strengthening the accountability towards that society by strengthening the position of the person to the state. Go on. Yeah?
This analysis assumes that identity is something that you have to artificially create. Please know that identity is based on common things that are real, like culture, religion, language, things that are real. We don't understand why you have to lie about history.
As we said, we do support lying in this particular manner, and I would rather say that we are looking for our identity. We have seen studies of evolution, of how we've evolved, and this is speaking about history not longer than 100 years ago, which is relevant to the country. So it's much more relevant, and it's much more important, and has much wider implications in those new transitional states. So this is why we believe that it is in our nature to look for what happened. So this is why, ladies and gentlemen, please make the difference between the state and the society, and how bringing you closer to the state can bring you closer to your society and prevent you from doing bad things in your society. Secondly, the concept of white lies, and why the government also has a role in those, because the government can decide much more than the people if a certain white lie is better for the future. Let's take the social infrastructure, for example. Let's take the security of the state, which my previous speaker mentioned. If there is a situation of a war, the sovereignty of the state is at stake. We have seen the situation of traitors, for example, in former Yugoslavia, where they were working for foreign intelligence services, and we identify the lack of identity as a main issue in this. If I'm giving an incremental benefit of getting a Bulgarian passport and changing my nationality for going to Germany and working there, the only thing that would stop me from this brain drain or from becoming a traitor to my country is thinking and believing that my country has done a lot of things and has done a lot of great good in this society. And this is why I should believe in my ancestors and that they have made a great contribution. So this is the role of national identity in prevention of things that lead to the damage of the sovereignty of the state. And let's talk about nationalism. It was really widely debated by both the opening and the closing benches. So first, we think that nationalism happens when there is a clash of opinions, and the government, as the main factor in the state, has a very powerful PR tool, and it is not as powerful as other Twitter or Facebook accounts or as other rumors that are being shared. The government has the educational system. The government has the public service. The government has the public television to which it can channel one particular idea which can be shared with the nation. And what we believe is that this is not some hypnotizing idea that will completely change the national identity, but just exaggerating the fact that would make people feel more connected towards the state, making epic stories about how one uprising happened. And we believe that this is very important because one, it is rational, because there is the check and balance if the government does something a very big untruth. And secondly, even if it does clash with some other state to a small extent, we believe that it is still better when it's compared to the national identity that the people need to feel and the benefits that we have presented. So for these reasons, we believe to propose them.
Please.
Hello, previous speakers. So, me as a part of the closing opposition, today I'm going to show you why we as an opposition, what we have done is telling you that lying about something that happened into the past or just falsificating it is wrong for the citizens, and most important is wrong for creating or strengthening a national identity. Okay, first of all, I'm going to start with some rebutings. So first, the closing government, I think, said that nations falsificate history by not hurting any other nation's sovereignty. So, first of all, if other nations are not involved at that unclear point of history, why is it important or necessary to falsificate it? If there were not two parts of two sides which contested that point of history, why is it important? Why is it necessary to falsificate? So even if we do falsificate something, we had to do with two parts. For example, our country and another country in a particular part of history. We have two possibilities. We can make a falsification of history that would that would put history in our favor or in their favor. First one is going to create or strengthen the hate with the other countries, because if we say that we were winners in this war against this country, immediately the other countries are going to somehow hate and are going to create a feeling of hate, or just to strengthen that feeling of hate, because we are telling something that they do not tell to their citizens. The second case is the falsification in the favor of other countries that took part in that particular point of history which we are trying to change. Okay, so that would directly strengthen their identity, because we are telling something in the same way that they are telling to their citizens. So strengthening their identity is equal to weakening ours. So that would make the other countries that took part in that point of history, which is contested between our government and their government, or our structures, feel more superior above us. So they wouldn't even stop with that point of history. They would start to even contest a lot more points of history. No, please. Okay. Okay, we know both parts, even the government and the opposition, we were all okay with creating history, but still we don't have it clear why should we strengthen our national identity by lying to our people. Okay, creating history doesn't mean recreating something that happened in the past. So creating history can be done in much other ways. Lying to the people about something that happened in the past is very dangerous, because in short term it can be revealed very fast, because not only the government has the experts that are historians or archaeologists or whatever, because there are a lot of other experts that work for social institutions that don't have to do with government. So it would lead the people and the citizens of that country, of that nation, to protest and chaos against their government, whom they didn't give the right to lie and to cheat to them, because saying something else about something that really happened is not just lying, it's cheating, because history somehow is property of us all. So then the first opposition said that winners write the history. Okay, we are okay with that. We understand that, but we say that it's good for us to first be winners and then be a part of changing the history. Just wait until I finish my argument. We say that we should first be winners and then be a part of an important part of changing the history. And being a winner is to be a winner. You don't need to lie to your people. You don't need to change something that happened in the past. You need to say that it is what it really happened and what the experts and the historians in your country know. And you can be a winner by making your country more developed. And this would only be by war against the bad things in your country, such as corruption and parallel structures and so. Okay, continue.
And when from an undeveloped country that has faced historically many own losses, wouldn't I feel inherently that country is a failure?
Okay, if you are in a country, in a nation that only have had losses in the history, and if someone comes and said, no, you haven't lost, you have won all the battles, then why are you undeveloped at the first point? So the non-development doesn't come from something that happened in the history. It comes from something that is already happening. So we need to change something that is in the present. So. Okay, they also mentioned that people actually living people in a country or in a nation need to know more about past citizens, their ancestors that live in the country, and if we lie to them that they obey the country, then people will obey too. But why can this be done only by lying? Why don't we teach people to obey, to know, to respect the country, the government, the state by other instruments, such as improving the educational system, improving that every sector of that the government has part on it. So basically, what I've been showing you is. The main flashpoint that took part in this debate, and why the government is wrong with all of them, and why we as an opposition are right with that. So thank you.